The Mike Hosking Breakfast, 6 to 9 weekdays on Newstalk ZB.
G'day, there's an upside to COVID as most of us got into this Reserve Bank thing, didn't we? We thought about it more than we ever had a better understanding of what they're about and how profoundly they affect and continue to affect all of our lives. The Fed is not cutting until maybe September, we've heard in the last few days, but then the jobs report came out last Friday. People panicked. There are calls for emergency cuts now. That won't happen, of course. And in a way, that's why we have Federal Reserves and not people who freak out running the place. Yesterday, the Australian Reserve Bank made their call. Last week, there was a real suggestion based on job numbers. In other words, there were too many of them. They were doing too well. Not only was there not going to be a cut, there could be a hike. That led to headline writers suggesting it would be the end of the Albanese government and that it was a decision of a generation. In the end, yesterday, they held, of course. Next week, we have our own central bank doing the same thing. There is an amount, not a lot, but a bit of thought that they could cut. I doubt they will. Jobs are not our problem. We certainly don't have too many of those left anymore. But inflation has not come down here to a state that they will be comfortable with. Non-tradable inflation, for example, is 5.4%. That is not cutting territory. Most retail banks say 1 or 2 cuts by the end of the year. They're most probably right, which means, and this is the important bit, that the Reserve Bank will be wrong. They're currently telling us they're not cutting officially until well into next year. But, big clue, the game has changed. Although we all march to our own beat, we are nevertheless intertwined. If the Fed in America cuts, we will too. We cannot be an outlier. We're so flotsam and jetsam-esque. We go where the world goes, basically. Of course, what has routed the US market in particular is the tech obsession. A bloke in a leather jacket made some really neat AI chips and everybody drank the Kool-Aid on what AI was going to do to the world. It's another bubble, not necessarily AI itself, but the hype around the next cool thing made by the next cool company. A lot of activity on markets is not rooted in basics or fundamentals or common sense, but noise and speculative greed. That, thank the good Lord, is not what central banks dabble in. Make no mistake, this is all a mess economically. New Zealand is not going remotely well, but increasingly the white heat of expectation shines on central banks from Wall Street to Shifley Square in Sydney yesterday to the Terrace in Wellington next week.
The Mike Hosking Breakfast, 6 to 9 weekdays on Newstalk ZB.